Goblins, gnomes, orcs, and even gnolls all have a different type of twist in the world of Eberron.
I think a definite undercurrent of Eberron is a lot of the things you're used to, we take and we look at them in a logical way, but a very different way than they've been looked at in the past. An example here is gnomes. Gnomes are small, they're smart, they're natural illusionists. If you're going forest gnome, you can talk to small animals. But they're usually presented as almost comedic relief. They're funny, they're cute. In Eberron, their society is this ruthless sort of nation built on intrigue and assassination. They essentially have the secret police that will just kill you if you're about to cause trouble. And the whole point is it fits. They're sneaky, they're good illusionists, so they're using those abilities for intrigue. You know, they're putting them to work. So it fits. You know, it ties to what a gnome can do. It's just, let's look at what they do in a different way. Same sort of approach to looking at, again, the monsters. What if gnolls weren't demon worshippers?
Are there other races that you've taken a spin on with Eberron?
Well, pretty much all the races are different in their own ways. And one of the things is, first off, we have the dragon marks. And dragon marks are something that in 5th edition we explore as essentially a sort of form of subrace. And the families that have the dragon marks control different aspects of the economy. So when you look to orcs and half-orcs, they have the mark of finding, which essentially, while it's good for bounty hunters, it's good for investigators, it's also good for prospectors. And so they're the primary source of dragon shards, the sort of fuel of the magical economy. And so, you know, orcs and certainly half-orcs, you know, have this very concrete place in the world that's very different from just being the outsiders or the barbarians, if you will. It is also the case, definitely both with orcs and goblins. Goblins had an ancient, quite advanced, but not really magical civilization on the main continent before humanity ever got there. It was destroyed in a conflict with the Dalkir, who were basically lords of madness, the creators of aberrations, you know, the sort of masters of the beholders and mind flayers. And they wiped out the goblin civilization, but the goblins still have these sort of remnants and these memories of this empire that was the equal of anything humanity's ever done. And so they're much more, they have issues with humans because humans have basically come and taken their stuff. But it's, again, not that they're just evil or they worship evil gods. They actually, you know, when you go and claim that magic sword, you're actually robbing their tombs. You know, they have a good reason to be annoyed about it. The orcs are much more primal, and orcs included, you know, the first druids on Eberron, and there's an order of orcish paladins that sort of defend this place called the Demon Wastes. And so orcs, it's very much about their sort of passionate, they're, you know, but again, they're not evil. And part of it is almost saying, you know, one of the things we're saying is Eberron is where you take the races you know. In default D&D, a lot of those races are basically defined as being shaped by their gods. Orcs are evil and violent because Rumsh has made them that. And we're saying, okay, but what happens if he's not there? What happens if you drop orcs in Eberron and they don't have an evil god driving them to do things? So instead, we're focusing on they're very passionate, they're very primal, and so they turn to other religions, to druidic power. So as I said, sort of all of them, it's pretty much we take that and we say, what is an interesting place for this race in the world? In some ways, I'd say the dwarves are almost the closest to the classic, but what we've done there is basically said the dwarves, the Mrorholds, have the sort of deepest resources, you know, precious metals, jewels. And so it's almost, again, to our world, a sort of parallel to oil barons or something like that, where, again, this is this small nation that is incredibly wealthy, and what would that mean? How would that be reflected? And so it's just a different little sort of detail in thinking about and making a dwarven character. Another slight thing I'll say that is slightly different about how Eberron approaches races is the major nations of the world are very metropolitan. And so part of the point is if you're a dwarf, you could come from the Murholds. If you're a gnome, you could come from Zilargo and be part of that deeply intrigue-laden civilization. But you could also be a gnome who just grew up in Sharn, and you're not part of that at all. And you can be a dwarf who's first and foremost from Brayland, and that's what you're about. And we even have an optional rule that is basically you can swap out your, essentially the languages you're given as a race. In other words, saying you could be a dwarf who doesn't speak Dwarven because you don't know any of that stuff. That's your grandfather, you know? And so we like sort of exploring that a little and really thinking about a distinction between race and culture, if that makes sense. And it's just, as I said, a slightly different approach to how it's usually done.
Thank you again, Keith Baker, for talking about the world of Eberron. You can purchase the Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron on dndbeyond.com by clicking on the link in this video description. I'm Todd Kenrick, your host. Thank you for watching.